Hello, welcome to Screen Talk with yours truly, Nomfanelo Malloy. So today I want to talk about Star Trek. Now, why Star Trek? Well, earlier today, Variety published a cover story where they talk about the Star Trek franchise in terms of what it means and what they plan to do moving forward. So I'm not going to get into depth in terms of what the article explores. I'll post a link in the description. So I want to first point out the collage here that the artist made is fantastic. So here, they title it "The Future of Star Trek: From Starfleet Academy to New Movies and Michelle Yeoh: How the 58-year-old franchise is planning for the next generation of fans." So, and here is the cover art. Does Star Trek still matter? I will get to that question later, which I titled this video. So, they mentioned here, so Alex Kurtzman, who is in charge of the TV side of Star Trek currently, he puts Star Trek as an institution. He goes on to say, doing Star Trek means that you have to deliver something that's entirely familiar and entirely fresh at the same time. But yeah, I agree to that. And yes, and I would say, in my opinion, Star Trek, I would say, is a beloved franchise. So, in terms of my Star Trek stories, I am a fan of Star Trek. So, growing up during the 90s and 2000s, I used to watch reruns of Star Trek The Next Generation with my family, particularly with my dad. And I just loved watching those episodes at the time. And at some point, I do want to rewatch those because it has been decades since I've last seen that show. And I just loved how, particularly with Star Trek Next Generation, how it's not just an entertaining show, but it also digs into philosophical and moral themes that it tackles with the episodes. And so Star Trek Next Generation is essentially is I would say I'm messed up today. So with TNG, I would say is my favorite Star Trek series. I have not seen all of the Star Trek series. I think I saw a bit of the original series and um, probably Deep Space Nine, maybe Enterprise, but beyond that, not so much. Like if we're counting the new Star Trek shows that's on Paramount Plus, I have seen the first half of season one of Discovery, which I'll be honest, I was mixed on that one. I didn't really finish that series, and just beyond that, I haven't seen the new stuff, but from what I've heard, it seems like people do not enjoy the new shows. So again, I wouldn't know because I have not seen the new shows. Now the film side, however, is a different stories. The films have been very hit and miss. For me, the films that stand out for me that I enjoy is Wrath of Khan and The Undiscovered Country. And I would need to rewatch the films because it has been a while since I've last seen them. And in terms of the new films, if I were to rank the new ones in terms of the Kelvin timeline, I'd probably put the 2009 version, then Into Darkness, then Beyond. So yeah, it declined for me. And yeah, it's just in terms of the state of the franchise is in an interesting place. Because if this happened, let's say way back when, I would say Star Trek would be the talk of the town because people were highly invested, not just the fans, but also the general public, and how it was mentioned, in various pop culture moments, most notably Galaxy Quest, if you guys remember that movie. And some would say that Galaxy Quest is is more Star Trek than some of the Star Trek installments. And oh yeah, the Orville, an, another sci-fi show by Seth MacFarlane. I loved that show, particularly with the last season they did, and yeah, and I would say that show has elements of Star Trek that I would say fans of Star Trek can identify with. So yeah, and I would say yeah, like because Star Trek, you could argue, was more relevant way back when as opposed to today. I think because the focus of Star Trek right now is on the TV side, and I think they want to bring focus on the film side. We'll just have to wait and see what happens there. So they do mention here, going back to the article, that they're planning. I think they finished filming a film with Michelle Yeoh, Section 31, where it's apparently a spy thriller that is Mission Impossible in space, which is interesting. And I believe Michelle Yeoh plays her character in Discovery. So that one should be interesting because I believe that one will be for Paramount Plus, or if they're gonna change it to theatrical, we'll just have to wait and see. And then earlier today, I saw that they're planning to do another installment of the Kelvin timeline. So, in terms of that situation, is quite fascinating because it seemed like after Beyond came out to 2016, I believe, there have been several attempts to make a fourth one, which have all, I would say, fell through for various reasons. I would say mainly creative reasons, if I were to guess. And with this new news right now that they got another writer involved, I am skeptical if this is actually going to get made. And in my opinion, it's just best to end that universe and start fresh, do a reboot with new characters, new storyline, new timeline, and all that stuff. Because and probably people would agree with this, that since with Anton Yelchin, who unfortunately passed away before Beyond came out, it just, how can I say, it just seems a bit off to continue that timeline without him, and especially how like how Beyond was wrapped up. I would say it's just better to move on, I suppose. And the receptions, I would say, like in terms of those particular films, maybe range from like positive to mixed to negative, because with the 2009 one, it seems like a lot of people were thrilled about that one. I was too at the time. I really enjoyed it. And I remember I saw that movie twice in theaters. So that's how much I really loved the movie, because I rarely see movies in theaters twice. And usually when that happens, it's a good sign. But just as the years went by, I just feel very different about that movie. Because as a lot of people point out, that with that one felt more of a Star Wars influence, where they try to cater to the general public as opposed to being a Star Trek film. Now, probably fans will debate on that, but I'm sure if you ask a normie out there, that's probably the typical answers that you'll probably get in terms of the reception for that movie. And then with not Roth, with Into Darkness, it felt very reminiscent of Wrath of Khan, but it just fell apart with that one. And then with Beyond, That one was just disappointing given how it came out during like the 50th anniversary of the franchise. It just didn't really live up to high standards. So yeah, that's why I would say for me there needs to be a reboot as opposed to a continuation of that timeline. We should even and several years have passed since Beyond came out, so it's just best to move on, start fresh. So I want to go back to this question: does Star Trek still matter? And for me, as a fan of Star Trek, yes, it still matters because even though Star Trek is not widely discussed as it used to be way back when, I still think there's enough people that care about the franchise. Now, if you ask a normie out there or someone in the general public if Star Trek still matters, that is debatable, but I figured that the majority of people will say it does not matter, typically because it's not widely discussed and it's just the direction of the franchise right now. People are just not happy with it. So that question, depends on who you ask, I suppose. But I would say for me, it still matters, but there needs to be reinvention of the franchise to not just satisfy the fans, but also to the general public. And if you ask me, they need to adopt a more micro approach as opposed to catering to the masses. Um, so that's pretty much my answer to that question. Now, I wonder too what's going to happen with this franchise because Star Trek is owned by Paramount. And Paramount has been going through tough times recently. And it's interesting too that not long after the Variety article came out, there was another article came out same day where apparently with Paramount Global, which owns all the Paramount properties, their credit rating was cut to junk status by S&P due to downgrade ratings pressure on its TV business. Now, if you have not been following what's been happening with Paramount, essentially they have been struggling financially and they are at the risk right now of going to bankruptcy, I believe. And there has been offers from several investors that want to own the company. And there are, with the people's names have been mentioned in terms of interested investors, they all have their different visions for the company. Where I believe one of them wants to essentially divide, get rid of the TV side and focus on the film side, while there was another one that wants to keep the TV side but get rid of the film side. So yeah. So in terms of that situation, we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. But I do believe that at some point, whether it's within the year or next year, the company is most likely going to be bought by investor. Now, in terms of who, we do not know at this point. So, and also the reason why I bring this up is because we don't know what's going to happen in terms of the Star Trek franchise, and depending on who we get as new ownership, we don't know like if Star Trek is still going to survive under new leadership because it's possible that since Star Trek is not in the conversation, I suppose they could possibly sell off that franchise or they'll still keep it, but they'll heavily change it where maybe they'll want to either focus heavily on the TV side, get rid of the films, focus on TV, or it could be reversed where they'll focus more on the films for theatrical and then just ignore or get rid of the TV side. So I would say right now the franchise is up in the air, and it's very interesting that they're announcing these different projects with Star Trek, given what is happening with the studio at this point. So yeah, a lot of questions on what's going to happen with the Star Trek franchise. So we shall see. But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts. So I want to know, does Star Trek still matter to you? It really depends on who you ask, and I'm sure everyone will have their different answers to that. So let me know in the comments section. Also, too, you could check out my social media links in the description. And also, too, if you want to support the channel, you could visit my Buy Me a Coffee link where you could donate by Buy Me a Coffee, or you could join any of my membership tiers. So that's pretty much all what I have to say. And I want to say thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.